The first Super Smash Bros. Gave us Link, the swordsman. In a cast of soft, friendly Nintendo faces, he and that Master Sword of his stood out. You could argue, though, that the Legend of Zelda hero was no pure swordsman. He supported his slashes and swings with other weapons. Debates of purity are ultimately, well, dumb, but there was absolutely room to further explore what sword fighters, an established archetype in fighting games, could mean to this unestablished fighting game. Soon after Super Smash Bros. 64 release in 1999, Super Smash Bros. Melee started a fast and brutal production, and it just so happened that some characters from a new series were right there to explore it. Intelligent Systems' Fire Emblem was truly apart from its legally separate but still close Nintendo cousins, tactical strategy epics possessing a wide, intense vision. The year Smash 64 came out, it got its 5th installment, 9 years after its 1990 debut. That all 5 were only released in Japan didn't stop Smash director Masahiro Sakurai. Today, he and the staff of each new Smash Brothers work hard to account for international players and more demographics. Characters only known to one region are relegated to smaller roles. That wasn't fully ignored back in the day, but it was less important, so adding a Japan-only fighter was less of a problem then than it would be now. Next was the issue of choosing the fighter. Each Fire Emblem game has dozens of characters, but culling the list was likely easy. It's sensible to focus on the protagonists, and Marth, future hero king of Arceana, was arguably the natural choice. His game, Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, was the very first entry, and it even got an expanded remake. And a terrible direct-to-video miniseries, the only product of the franchise that had scored an international release. In fact, Sakurai had wanted to add Marth to the first Smash roster. Like Bowser, Mewtwo, and King Dedede, he'd have to wait his turn due to Smash 64's short development time. In theory, Marth would have been an explicit foil to Link, complementing the knight's rough style with something more elegant and genteel. There wasn't a character like that on the roster, so Marth would have filled a role players may not have even considered. And that's exactly what the Prince did in Melee. Speedy, graceful, and cutting, he caught players' attention immediately with this smooth quality in his moves. The image of a swordsman with such polished, dignified movement was always going to stand out in a game as raucous and bombastic as this one. It was like he was above the tone. The heart of this idea is, to quote Sakurai in Melee's official Japanese website, Marth's fluid sword technique. At its core, Marth is a fencer. A silly, 2D fighting jumpy party game version of a fencer, sure, but one nonetheless. If Link uses his sword like a blunt instrument, Marth's falchion is an extension of his body. He uses it for every single attack other than his weak grab and throws. Elegance is also a part of this. Marth's attacks are quick, but they've also got a wide range and soft, sweeping motions. Smash makes each hit seem so pronounced with big, pretty trails that catch your eye. With the exception of his shield breaker, which went from intimidating swing to intimidating stab, his specials follow this. His Dolphin Slash is an elegant launch. Sure, it's a bad recovery, but it looks good. Dancing Blade, a move that's arguably the centerpiece of his design, provides options for attacks and a powerful flow. And then there's the counter. Marth was not the only fighter to introduce a direct counterattack in Melee, but his was the most famous. This trick of negating and reversing an attack, judo style, was captivating. It was born out of Sakurai's desire to represent Fire Emblem's turn-based mechanics, and countering is a fundamental of the series, but in Smash the counter took on a special form. It expanded further and further, each sequel providing new iterations. These attacks are supported by a powerful and notable feature, that every single attack of Marth's rapier is most powerful in both damage and knockback at its tip. In the Brawl era, Sakurai described the ideal way for the Prince to fight as just nicking the bridge of his foe's nose. The tipper is what Marth's legion of fans call it, the kind of nickname you give to something warm and familiar. It's a fairly compelling power, one that naturally gets matched by a sour spot at the falchion's base. Get in too close, and the blade does less damage and less knockback. This, of course, only gently encourages Marth players to stay at just enough of a distance that an attack will only barely touch, to be a fencer of their own. Sweet spots had been in the first Smash Brothers, notably Luigi's Fire Jump Punch and the various Meteor Smashes, but a fighter who only traded in sweet spots was something altogether new. This distinction, this specificity, is the final piece that empowered Marth, making him the breakout star of Melee. Roy, his clone from an upcoming Emblem release, was also popular, just less so. He was fun, easy to learn at casual and competitive levels, and impossible to ignore. It may have actually saved the two swordsmen entirely. A question Sakurai and Nintendo asked during Melee's localization was whether its international releases would even keep the Fire Emblem content at all. As the story goes, the staff of Nintendo of America found themselves so charmed by Marth and Roy that they decided to keep them in. With untranslated Japanese dialogue, many Western players found exotic. The legend of Marth expanded. He wasn't just a popular character in a popular fighting game, he was the mascot of a series that just found a worldwide foothold. Players looked into his games, and it turned out there was a broader audience audience for them. The 7th Fire Emblem, 2003's The Blazing Blade, would be released in Japan and the West, as would almost every successive game. While Roy was cut from Super Smash Bros. Brawl before reappearing a game later, remade and unique, Marth stayed. His international role was cemented. And Marth would himself drink deep of the success with guest spots galore. He gets plum roles in crossovers like Fire Emblem Warriors and Tokyo Mirage Sessions. Fates added him as DLC, and Gage made him Phantom of him into a main character. The biggest moment, though, was his story being the basis for Fire Emblem Awakening. Awakening took on a mythic quality of its own, and meant to save a series at a commercial low, it became the best-selling entry at the time by far and charted Fire Emblem's direction for the next few years. It incorporated elements from across its history as tribute, most notably its use of Marth. Set thousands of years after Shadow Dragon and its remakes, the game reimagined the prince as a culture hero, no less mythical to his land as he had become to Smash's audience. Within the story itself, Marth's legacy is challenged in the form of his descendant Lucina. The future witness, a time-traveling princess from an apocalypse years down the line, drives much of the plot in disguise, as a warrior who may or may not be the hero king returned. Lucina became popular in her own right. Her steely personality and a role in the game that saved Fire Emblem cemented her own celebrity. So when production on the 4th Smash Bros. Began just months after Awakening's release, drawing from the newest, biggest, most admired Fire Emblem game was a natural. Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS and Wii U made a character out of Lucina's co-star Robin, while she was planned as an alternate costume for Marth. Having a fighter's color variation turn them into new fighters was new for the series, and having it done to a character as popular as she was, and for a base fighter as popular as he was sensible. However, Lucina wouldn't be kept in the role of a fighter's costume. She'd be turned into a fighter outright. Sakurai tinkered with her, making her slightly shorter than Marth and playing with the properties of her parallel falchion. Costumes have to act exactly the same in a fight, so the staff spun those ideas off into a clone character, that fighting game staple of copying a fighter, especially someone friendly and relatively easy, like Marth, into someone slightly different. And if Marth is friendly and relatively easy, Lucina's even more so. She fights with the exact same moves and animations, but with Marth's signature sweet spot removed. That means she lacks some of the extra bite of her ancestor, but without his most glaring weakness. Her other differences are largely cosmetic, new taunts and the brand of Naga in her left eye, but honestly, that's enough. Initially, Lucina was unpopular. The prior Smash Bros. Game had worked to give its clone characters unique moves and attributes to the point where they felt like their own fighters. Incorporating more traditional clones back was seen as a waste, and the princess, the first of them explicitly confirmed, bore a lot of fan ire. Today, that frustration's cooled significantly, and Lucina's among the most beloved of what Smash officially calls Echo Fighters. Her attitude and her playing with Marth's defining gimmick have improved her standing amongst fans. In the most recent game, Ultimate, she rivals Marth in the scene he typically dominates. In a way, Lucina is both a new character distinguishing herself and the expansion of an old character's story. Marth came to Smash as something wild, but wild in a way that was approachable. He, and Roy, his original clone, gave this series new audiences. His status as Fire Emblem's first hero was used to help the franchise escape video game purgatory. But he's also a Smash fixture just as much. His style is an essential part of the series and arguably a baseline for its many sword fighters. Marth has himself. In Lucina, he has a great Echo Fighter. In Roy, he has a spin-off who's become fully distinct. The Hero King's an icon not for one series but two, a history that started from that perfect fencing arm. Thanks for watching! If you like this, consider supporting us on Patreon, just like those wonderful people on screen. As for Roy, Marth's first clone, we'll talk about him another day. For now, take care, and remember to return to the source.